Hello, and welcome back to Horrify, the only channel on the internet which deals with horrors, both fictional and factual. The only channel that is apart from all the other ones. So, what are we going to be looking at today? I'm glad you asked. We are going to be looking at 5 classic horror books. So, what do we mean by classic, first of all? I'm kind of looking at books that were, or indeed are, influential in the horror genre. So it doesn't depend necessarily on the age of the story, although they are all pretty old. We're talking really about influence and the sort of cultural impact that they have had. So what better way to start than with our old friend Count Dracula. Now, Dracula's obviously an extraordinarily well-known work. People know about Dracula from movies, from TV series. You don't have to have ever laid eyes on the book. You don't even have to know that there is a book. You don't even have to know that the character Dracula was originally created by a writer and originally appeared in a book. Everyone's heard of Dracula. Dracula has really permeated the public consciousness. So I don't think that the importance of Dracula as a novel in itself can be disputed. As far as a novel itself goes, I'm not going to give really long reviews of each book here, just a brief synopsis. You know, the basic story obviously is that Jonathan Harker travels to Transylvania in order to complete a business transaction on behalf of his firm with Dracula. And Dracula travels to England via ship, and lots of fun and games ensue. I'll be honest, it's not one of my favourite vampire stories. I mean, it's a bit dated, obviously. It was written in the late 1900s. The characterisation isn't great, but it's a good book. It is a good read. I don't want to be too hard on it, and it's also a book that's instrumental. Was instrumental in introducing a lot of the familiar vampire tropes that we know about today. You know, the vampire can't go out in daylight. The vampire can be repelled by a crucifix. The vampire can be the vampire has to ask for permission to enter an abode. All these kind of very familiar vampire tropes. It's really Dracula that brought this to the public consciousness. Of course, Dracula was by no means the first vampire novel, and by no means the first vampire story. There are vampire myths and legends that are centuries old. I think vampire myths and legends are as old as humanity. Pretty much every culture in the world has vampire legends. They have different names. There's the vampire, the Strigoi, the Nosferatu, the vampire, the politician. Every society on Earth has legends about blood-sucking creatures that want to suck the life out of us. So, next up, what do we have? We have Rosemary's Baby by Ira Levin. Another classic, obviously, otherwise it wouldn't be on a classical books list. So what's the book basically about? So the basic gist of things is there's a young couple, and I think they're newly married, and they managed to find an apartment in a rather exclusive building. And you know, they're really delighted. They were house hunting. They want to start a family, and they needed a place to live, and they've found this lovely apartment. And this apartment, is in a building with a bit of a reputation. And the neighbours are all very kind and very welcoming and very helpful, if a bit eccentric and if a bit intrusive. And the reason for that is the neighbours are part of a satanic cult, and they would like Rosemary to be the mother of Satan's child. Of course, they don't come right out and say this. They kind of ensnare the couple slowly and kind of pull them deeper and deeper into their web. And Rosemary gets impregnated by the devil. So that's the basic synopsis. The story itself, it's a rather thin book, as you can see, but it's very well written. It's very enjoyable. It's very fast-paced. I found it very interesting, the interactions between Rosemary, her husband and the people in the building. And she has a friend on the outside who's somewhat sceptical about all the goings on. And it's just a very, very engaging book. It's one of those books as well, like Dracula, which has a great deal of cultural recognition. Not as much as Dracula, but, Rosemary's Baby is very, very, very well known. Okay, on to our next book. Next book is The Dawn of the Dead. So this book this novelization by George A. Romero and Susanna Sparrow, basically is a novelization, of the story of a zombie apocalypse. The zombie apocalypse, and a group of people take refuge in a shopping mall, and they're quickly besieged by the undead. And, the book is about their struggle for survival. They also have to contend against a violent biker gang as well that want to plunder the mall. So obviously this is a very, very influential story. Again, I think it's the story it's one of the stories, you've got various Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, and so on. Various books that really put it's this series that really put zombies on the map. And I think that we wouldn't have TV series like, The Walking Dead or Z Nation or Black Summer without the Dawn of the Dead the original Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead books and movies. I've got to say that this novelization of the book, of the story, I don't think from a literary point of view it's quite as good as the previous two books I've talked about. It's serviceable, it's okay. I mean, the story cracks along, and it's reasonably exciting. But I don't think it's I just don't think it's as well written. Obviously, there are movies. There's the Day of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and so many other zombie movies. I would say Dawn of the Dead, the 2004 remake with Ving Rhames. That movie adaptation, I think, was better I enjoyed it more than reading this. This book is on here because of its cultural significance. Personally speaking, I'm not a great fan of zombies. I prefer vampires. Zombies just because they're a mindless antagonist. You've got the slow-moving ones, which I find terribly boring, honestly, and then you've got the fast-moving ones, but I still find them pretty boring, although a lot of people obviously love them. Next up, we've got a really, really significant book, The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty. So the basic synopsis of the story is that a young girl called Regan is seemingly possessed by something. And at first it's not clear whether she's possessed or whether she's suffering from some kind of mental illness. And her mother, obviously sees this increasing deterioration in her daughter. The mother and the daughter are alone. The mother, I believe, is an actress, and so she's got lots of friends in the film world. And so she comes from this kind of strata of society, this kind of lifestyle. And her relationship with her daughter is very good. And, as I said, her daughter starts to manifest these strange behaviours, and things get worse and worse. Eventually, two priests are called in. There's an older priest who has kind of like been around the block a few times, very experienced, and he goes in there with a younger priest called Damien Karras, and Damien Karras is one of the main characters in this book. And Damien Karras is a novice priest, and they conduct various investigations to determine if they believe that the girl is possessed. She is, and the book really obviously goes on to detail their fight to free her from whatever's possessing her, the devil himself perhaps, or some other kind of lesser demon. This book is extremely, I think, influential, because I think that it's the granddaddy of all the possession. The granddaddy of the possession genre, I would say, the modern possession genre. Again, I'm not saying it's the first work to address demonic possession. Like vampirism, demonic possession has been around for as long as humanity's been around. Every society in the world has legends of demonic possession, stories of demonic possession, right up to the present day. So The Exorcist isn't telling us something that something new. But what it did do is it kind of put possession stories, I would say, on the map. You know, people possessed by demons or possessed by the devil. And honestly, this book does it extremely well. It's an extremely well written book. I loved reading it. It's really great. It's really well written. Superb characterization. It's very, very atmospheric. You know, you really feel that you really draws you into the story. I would say that this book, more than the other three that I've read, is the strongest one for really drawing you into the atmosphere. There's a very kind of dark, menacing atmosphere to it, I think. I'm not going to give you any spoilers as to how it ends, but I would highly recommend it. Then, for our final book on this list, we have got I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. So this is another vampire story. It says on the cover here, I don't know if you can see, soon to be a major film starring Will Smith. Now, if you haven't seen the Will Smith adaptation, the Will Smith version of I Am Legend, you absolutely must treat yourself, do yourself a favour, and don't watch it. It is bloody awful. As a quick digression, obviously all of these books have been filmed. Obviously there are numerous versions of Dracula. The Exorcist is an absolutely classic work. Along with the book, it's what really propelled kind of the exorcism genre into kind of like the mainstream, I would say. There's a film of each of these books, and so yeah, obviously being influential books, they've been filmed, some of them many times. Some of them have many TV series that's been spawned from them as well. I Am Legend, as I said, there was The Abomination with Will Smith in it. I think it's a 2008 movie. There was also a film in the 70s, I believe, starring Charlton Heston called The Omega Man. And there was also a film before that based on this book as well. But I'll be honest with you, I would need to do some more research about that because I don't have any details about that right now, which is pretty naughty of me, if you ask me. So I Am Legend, what's it about? Well, it's about a man who is apparently the last man on Earth. Everyone else in the world has apparently been either killed by a mysterious plague or turned into a kind of vampire. And so this man, he lives in a heavily fortified house. He's got his own generator, he's got his own food supply, and he's basically barricaded in there. The vampires can't go out during the day, but at night time they like to come out and surround his house, and they demand that he comes out so that they can suck his blood. Spoiler alert, he doesn't. During the day, the protagonist goes around, you know, hunting out the vampires in their sleeping places and pounds a stake through their heart. You know, he's slowly trying to get rid of them, eliminate them, which obviously is impossible. There are too many. So the book basically starts at that point and develops from there. And it becomes more and more complex as a story. You know, there's the possibility that there's another survivor or other survivors, and the story kind of takes us on this particular kind of this man's particular journey. It's it's again, like the others, it's very well written, it's very engaging, it's a short book, it deserves its legendary status in my opinion. When I say legendary status, I think it's got a great deal of significance. It's not as significant as Dracula or The Exorcist, I would say, because I don't think, you wouldn't say that it kicked off, it started an entire genre, but I would still call it very influential. It's one of those books that most people have heard of, or people have at least heard of the story if they've heard of the films. I would highly recommend it. It's a good read. It's bleak, obviously, given the circumstances of the story, but you know, it keeps you guessing, and it's not a linear read. It's not that, you know, the synopsis I've just given you. It really does develop from there. It's not just a guy living in a house, surviving, and so on. So there we have it. These are my top five classical horror stories. Just to underline, when I was going through them, I wasn't implying, for example, that Dracula is the best at number one and I Am Legend is the least of the five at number five. I was just basically numbering them as I got them to hand. I wouldn't presume to put them in any particular order. I think it depends on what you like. I think it depends on what you're into. It depends on what you look for in a story, what you look for in a book. As I said before, I don't particularly like zombies. So anything with zombies in it, you know, it's not going to be my favourite. Obviously, the cultural impact of these books is also vastly augmented by the vast amount of media that surrounds them. Obviously, Dracula has spawned everything from books, TV series, spin-off characters, everything. You know, so The Exorcist is the same. There's The Exorcist movie, there's The Exorcist 2, I think there's a third one. So people don't have to have, you know, read these books necessarily to have heard of them, or to have heard of the characters, or to know about the particular stories. But they've all entered the popular culture, the public consciousness, I would say. And some of them, I mean, Dracula would be the principal example. Dracula's one of those characters who's really entered, I would say, like a global consciousness. There are very few fictional characters, I would say, who are so well known that pretty much anyone in the world, unless they're a hunter-gatherer bushman in the Kalahari Desert, that everyone will have heard of them, will know who they are. Certainly in the developed world, or the so-called developed world, everyone's going to know who that character is. And Dracula's one of those characters. So anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you found this enjoyable, or at least helpful, or at the very least, tolerable. Thank you for watching. Please, if you like this video, like and subscribe, or subscribe and like. And I will see you next time. Thank you. Goodbye.